All right, now it's time to pot the crocuses. Now I'm using this little duck pot that I got at the thrift shop for $1.50 like 8 years ago. He's just been sitting around. I'm a little bit worried he might not be quite large enough for the 9 crocuses that I have, but I'm going to try it anyways and see what I can fit in there. If not, I'll move to a larger pot, but I gotta at least try the duck because he's been waiting for a while. Now my little pot is not very deep and it's not very large, so I'm going to be working with non-hardening clay. I just have a few blocks of it here. This is clay that never dries out, never hardens. That means you can change your arrangement later. So that's one of the reasons why I like working with it. But it also gives a lot more grip than something like styrofoam on your flowers, and you can remold it. Sometimes with floral foam, if you poke a hole in it and then try to move it, that hole's always there. You can't fill it back in. And so if you try to put something else in that hole, it might wiggle around and just not hold very securely. So I'm not a huge fan of foam. However, if you have a deeper pot than what I've got here or a larger pot, you might want to fill your pot halfway with foam and then put a little bit of clay on top just for a little bit of extra security. Now I have potted arrangements completely in foam before. It does work. It's just not my favorite. So you can use the foam if you want to. If that's your thing, you just go for it. I'm not going to stop you here. I'm just showing you a general process of how you can pot these. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to go ahead and fill the pot entirely with clay. So I'm going to mold my clay into little pieces. I'm going to make sure that it sticks to the sides of my pot. Now, non-hardening clay generally starts out fairly firm, and the more you work with it, the softer it becomes and the easier it becomes to manage. Now, there is also air dry clay that is a little bit softer. Now, the crocuses are really lightweight flowers, so they don't need a lot of weight in the bottom to hold them. So you could work with air dry clay if you prefer. But air dry clay is really meant, is really meant for really thin pieces. You're not supposed to go over a 1/4 inch thick or it doesn't dry properly on the inside. It might crack and everything. Now that's mostly an aesthetic reason for things like models and stuff that you're usually making with air dry clay. So I'm not sure if it's really that big of a deal with French beading here with potting our little flowers. I think I need a little bit more clay here. I'm just working with this brand. This is a new brand that I'm working with because I can't find the stuff that I usually use. The stuff I usually use is Sargent Art brand Plastilina clay. But I'm going to try this new stuff. So far I'm liking it. So I'm going to fill my pot, not all the way because I want to leave room along the rim for my covering material. I'm going to be using this preserved moss. Sorry, I'm a little close there. Some preserved moss to put on top there and fill in between the flowers. It'll just look a little bit like grass in there. But I want to leave some room up top in my clay, or above my clay, to be able to put that in there and not explode out of my pot. All right, now after working with the clay, go wash your hands because it's going to leave crap on your hands. All right, now I've got to trim my stems so they're just a little bit deeper than the pot. I'm going to be turning them into a little hook shape. So I'm just going to hold it up here, and I'm okay with my floss going down a little bit because that way it's going to make sure that it's completely covered. So I'm going to cut about right there. All right, now I'm going to be making a little hook shape in the bottom of my stems just so that the flowers can't really spin around. When you've got a single stem like this, whether you're putting it in foam or clay, sometimes they spin around. Clay tends to hold the flowers a little bit better than foam does, but still we're going to put just a little tiny hook in there. That little double stem there is going to make it a little bit harder for the stem to turn around. So again, I'm going to measure the stem against my pot. I don't think that's quite short enough. So I'm going to try and shorten it just by making my hook a little bit longer. All right, that should be about deep enough there. Now you can just shove this down into the clay if you want to. It's a little bit easier, especially if you're doing the hook method there, if you pre-poke a hole. So I'm just using a little butter knife because it's long and skinny, like the little hook at the bottom of my flower. So I'm going to use a little knife, just kind of go down, wiggle back and forth a little bit to make it a little bit larger. Now the great thing about foam is that if my hole ends up too large, I can just remold the clay tighter around the flower so it'll hold still. All right, so I've got my little pre-hole drilled in there, and then I can put my flower in, and then I can mush my clay back around my little stem. All right, now I'm going to do that with all of my other little flowers. I've got mixed flowers here, mixed colors in my arrangement, so you can clump them together or you can kind of mix them around. Either is going to be just fine. Now I've got right here where my embroidery floss is not all the way down against the clay. That's going to be fine because I'm putting grass on top. But you do want it kind of close so that you don't have any spots where the embroidery floss isn't covering, sticking out. You don't want that green sticking out above your grass. So it's about right there. I'm going to cut and then make a little hook and then insert it into my hole. Now as you're pushing it through the clay, try not to like grab anything super important because you do have to put a little bit of pressure on there. And if you grab the embroidery floss, you might actually shove the little wraps of your embroidery floss down and expose parts of your stem. So I'm going to grab like right at the bottom of my leaves and then push down because it shouldn't hurt my leaves too much to apply a little bit of pressure there. And then remold the clay around the stem. One of the reasons why I chose to try a smaller pot is because I was also looking at other kinds of crocuses, and with all of my little classes I tend to get a little bit extra. I want to make this color and I want to make that color, I want to make all the colors, and then I don't end up being able to pull it off and I end up sad. So I'm doing a smaller pot on purpose so that I don't have room for more flowers. So I can just be happy with the ones that I've made already. Now I am varying the heights of my flowers just a little bit. So you can kind of see they're just barely different. Yellow over here. I don't know if I'm gonna like this pot. I might end up switching them, but either way, I feel like I'm blocking that poor little duck's face. I don't know, maybe I should bend them out this way a little bit. I don't know, guys. I might switch my base. I'm not sure I like this little guy, but we'll see. So you can just shove it through. I'm going to show you that here. You'll want to grab somewhere secure and push down. This clay is not as hard as the Sargent Art stuff that I usually work with. Okay, so I'm just going to continue until all of my little flowers are in, and then I'll come and show you guys how to do the grass part. Okay, I am switching my pot. I just felt like the crocuses were coming up over the poor little duck's head and kind of dwarfing the little duck. So we'll save little ducky man for a different plant. And instead I'm going to try at least this little basket weave teacup. I also got this at the thrift shop for $1. Haha. Okay, so this one was already filled with clay. I used this as a demo for another class on potting. So I've already got the clay in there. This is non-hardening clay. It's several years old that this clay's been in there, and I can still mold it and move it around, and so that's why I like non-hardening clay. All right, so I'm gonna go put my little flowers in here. Same method I used for little duck man. Just make a little hole, put your stem in, and then remold the clay around the hole. All right, so I've got all 9 of my little flowers in there. I mixed my colors around. I've got more room in my pot. I'm probably gonna add more flowers in. I really wanted to make some purple stripy ones and maybe some lighter yellow ones. So I'm probably gonna add those to my pot eventually. So I'm okay with the pot being a little bigger now. That's also one reason why I like non-hardening clay, is because I can play with my arrangement later. If I decide I don't like it anymore, I can just, you know, do whatever I want with it. I can take the flowers out, put them in a different arrangement. I can add more to it. It doesn't have to be done. All right, so that's one of the benefits of working with non-hardening clay. Now after I've got my flowers in there, I'm going to add this little moss on top. It just ends up looking like grass. You could also use something like pebbles or marbles or something like that, or even like mulch. you can put that in there. I'm going to use the grass, the little moss stuff. This is preserved forest moss. I just get this from the floral department of the craft store in town. So just break up little pieces. It's really, really messy. And I'm going to put it around and try to cover up all my clay. Now what I recommend doing after you pot a plant is to go through and do some shaping. Now crocus leaves are pretty straight, but we don't want them to be perfectly straight because that just looks abnormal. So I'm just going to go through and just kind of give them a little bit of a curve, maybe not so they're not like pencil straight, sticking straight up there. Maybe a couple of little tiny bends. Maybe I'll fold the top of one leaf down. Maybe I'll add a little bit of curve to this leaf. Got a little wonky there. All right, so there, that just adds a little bit of an extra touch there. Don't do all of your leaves exactly the same. Whenever you're shaping flowers, don't do everything exactly the same. Make them all a little bit different. Go different directions. That's what nature does. So, okay, so going through there, add some little curves, some little bends. But again, crocus leaves are fairly straight most of the time. So there is my little pot of crocuses. And now I'm going to go make some more stripy ones and shove them in my pot too.